In the news tonight, the numbers set for retrenchment by government could be lower than the 3,000 initially proposed. This from Minister of Labour, Senator Dr. Esther Bayer-Suckoo. She says the current figure is below that sum. Dr. Bayer-Suckoo was speaking to the media after a workshop hosted by the Barbados Light and Power on performance-based systems at the Island Inn Hotel.
Not by any means are we going to be in a position to send home those hundreds of people who have to go home. And I say hundreds because right now there's no telling what that list is. I've heard people saying, oh, 5,000, 6,000. The truth is, when we started this exercise, we said that from a fiscal perspective, we could get where we want to get if 5,000 people went home. But as I said, the unions, we sat with the unions, and then it came down and it came down and it came down, and I don't know where it's going to end up because it's certainly below 3,000. You know, it is below 3,000. It might be even much lower than that because we looked at the modalities and because the unions have tried to put other options and we have looked at other options as well.
Dr. Bayer-Suckoo also addressed an issue about who should see the list of employees to be retrenched.
I was hearing concerns that the cabinet had to see the list. No, the Prime Minister has to see the list because he's the Minister of Civil Service. As far as my reckoning is, he is a minister with responsibility. So I imagine he will want oversight before Civil Service releases the list. The list then would be that list that would have input from all the various agencies and ministries signaling who. And the list that comes to civil service is just a raw list, who is eligible based on the criteria that we set. But then, of course, it has to be fine-tuned. But that is the list that the unions will get as well.
Productivity levels within the public sector will not fall when those public sector employees go home at the end of this month. It is the view of the Director of the Office for Public Sector Reform, Michael Archer. He notes that even though there will be fewer workers in the service, those who remain are competent.
The public sector will not necessarily lose out as long as those persons who are unproductive are the ones that are not around. And that's being frank. Okay? But we need to have works in the public sector, at least to have a sense of urgency, a commitment to excellence, continuous improvement, because that's what public sector development or public sector reform is all about. Continuous improvement and a commitment to excellence.
Mr. Archer believes the current situation should serve as a wake-up call for all workers. He says employees should commit to excellence and always do their best in whatever field they are employed.
Productivity is important and that they must be productive. So this is in fact a wake-up call for all workers, both in the public sector and the private sector. And finally, you must recognize that when you work good, you feel good about yourself. Okay, so working well has its benefits. I would implore all workers to put the best foot forward, especially in these trying times.
Employers considering sending home workers in the current economic climate need to familiarize themselves with the country's labour laws. The suggestion from Labour Officer Donna Best Frederick. She says the Labour Department regularly receives calls from employers wanting to know about their rights as they relate to layoffs. Speaking to the CBC after a presentation at the Labour Department's Labour Management Relations Seminar, Ms. Best Frederick said there is a process that needs to be followed.
There's a consultation process that must take place prior to the actual layoff period. That consultation process follows certain steps that must be taken in terms of writing the Chief Labour Officer and outlining the various categories of workers that must be laid off and the reason for the layoffs. So that is what we advise in terms of the layoffs.
Ms. Best Frederick says workers who feel they were not treated fairly by their employer could seek recourse from a tribunal set up by the department. Meanwhile, fellow Labour officer Kama Salanki-Burke says today's half-day seminar dealt with several pieces of legislation, including the Holiday with Pay Act and the Protection of Wages Act.
Today we're looking at the private sector, so it will be a cross-section. We would have invited persons through the media, and persons would have expressed interest in attending, so we would have had participants this morning from a cross-section of the island.
Words of advice from UNICEF to Barbados' private sector to pull up its socks in helping the island to develop. While the UNICEF representative for the Eastern Caribbean, Sandy Lewin, applauded corporate Barbados' support in development programs so far, she says its social responsibility should extend to all aspects that affect citizens' standard of living.
Whether we're talking about global warming and climate change, or the widening gap between the very rich and the very poor, and the need to reduce poverty, the corporate world has the central place in reducing carbon dioxide emissions, who controls the price of fuel, food, and transport, which affects the level of affordability of those who need those essential commodities, who produces guns and ammunition, the machines of war, who directs global communication and media.
Ms. Lewin's comments followed a series of presentations last night made by the Republic Bank to several charities and special needs schools. Included was the Erdeston Special Education Unit, which now has a 3-year covenant from the bank in form of speech therapy lessons, a library and an outdoor classroom. Republic Bank indicates that its 5-year focus will be on literacy. And Barbados UNICEF representative says there are many ways corporate Barbados can support literacy, especially after a student passes through the school system.
You can support community libraries, conveniently located, that encourage a reading culture. You can urge the government to have a national access to information policy that facilitates access to all forms of information and encourages and stimulates research. You can support sound adult education programs that are publicly and privately funded for those willing to relearn the basics as well as the new challenges posed by the information age.
Industry Minister Donville Innes says he has been able to give an accurate account of the Barbadian economy to Trinidad and Tobago's business community. And he also took time out during a trip there to address their concerns about its current state and government's plans to grow it. Mr. Innes told the members that the government of Barbados appreciated investment from Trinidad and would welcome more. He also noted that Barbados hoped to increase its exports to the Twin Island Republic. Speaking to the CBC by telephone after his presentation, Mr. Innes says the meeting went well.
I wouldn't say that concerns have been allayed. I think it's more a case where they wanted to hear from a government minister in terms of what we're doing, not just to read things in the newspaper or listen to the radio, but actually engage in a discussion in terms of what we're doing. And the feedback I've gotten indicate that yes, the government is on the right track. The government is doing the right things that need to be done to stop further decline in the economy and to turn things around. And we're actually seeing signs of the Barbados economy beginning to pick back up a bit.
Mr. Innes says the business community is also concerned about the strength of the Barbados dollar and speculation that it may be devalued.
They made it clear that that is not on the agenda of the government. While Trinidad have natural resources such as oil, they could have withstood the spiraling effect for devaluation when they did it. Truth of the matter is that it will have a far more devastating effect upon our economy and society for generations to come. So that is definitely not the agenda of the Barbados government. As a matter of fact, I wish people stop talking about it. But I think that message is made clear to the Trinidadian business community that that's not on our agenda. We are doing the things that will ensure that does not feature in the foreseeable future.
JetBlue Airways has acknowledged the need for information to be relayed at all levels following recent cancellations that left passengers infuriated. The US-based airline held a press conference this afternoon at the Grantley Adams International Airport to update the island on compensation procedures which are underway. Some 22,000 cancellations were recorded following recent record snowfall blamed on a polar vortex that affected the United States and Canada. This resulted in passengers being stranded at the Grantley Adams International Airport. Vice President, Sales and Revenue Department at JetBlue, Dennis Corrigan, says the airline is moving to win back affected customers.
one customer at a time, one flight at a time. And also in closing, I would like to thank Terry and our business partners at Caribbean Aircraft Handling. We know those folks were particularly in a tough spot. One of the main reasons for my visit down here yesterday and today was to spend time with those guys and ladies, talking to them, thanking them, getting their input on what we can do going forward to improve. And I would like to sort of publicly thank them because when they have the 190 angry customers in their face, it's not easy.
Well, however, Mr. Corrigan says there will be no question of compensation coming out of flights being grounded this week due to bad weather.
Generally for a weather event, Tuesday being the prime example, when it is a weather event and essentially no one is flying in and out of New York by late afternoon on Tuesday or Monday into Tuesday, that's when you're looking at it's an uncontrollable event. It's when we feel like this was something we could have done a better job of or we could have avoided. So for example, the best example is the airplane that came down here Saturday and then canceled right in front of me. That was something we felt like we should have had better control of that situation. And so that's when we do this sort of blanket.
Local travel agents say bookings for Trinidad Carnival are not the same compared with last year. Director of Sales and Marketing of Value Vacations, Ann Seeley, without giving any figures, has suggested that the fall-off may be due to the state of the economy.
It might be where persons are being a bit careful and in a wait-and-see game, and some of it could be a repercussion of the economic conditions that we have right now. Usually there are still those who are stragglers, who at the last minute say, okay, I'm going to go to Carnival.
Sales and Marketing Manager of Going Places Travel, Alana Gray, has explained that the numbers for the traditional traveller are still consistent. These traditional travellers would have booked for Trinidad Carnival from last year, August and September.
Because it's such a good event, and I find that when the economy tends to get bad as well, people like to get away and, experience something fun and forget their worries for a while. When you talk to people that have done Trinidad Carnival, it is such a memorable experience and they love it.
Well, both the economic and industrial affairs of the island continue to have a trickle-down effect on non-governmental charities. YWCA President Andrea Taylor has reported a decrease of sponsorship to their breakfast program, but there has been an increase in the number of students coming forward for the early morning meals.
Obviously, families are having struggles right now as we speak. There is no two ways about it. There's no us trying to get and move around the playing field. We're having families who are having difficulties trying to meet the day-to-day living arrangements. And as such, we're seeing those volumes coming in and we're trying to facilitate them as best as we can for as long as we can, and we will.
And the CARE program, organised by the St. Dominic's Roman Catholic Church, says more Barbadians are coming to them for psychological counselling. Coordinator for the CARE ministry, Lynette Andrew, also says the church's employment program may soon kick into full gear.
We are anticipating a spike, so what we may have to do is to plan some workshops rather than have people come to us individually. We may have to put on workshops to assist people, in terms of their skills in looking for jobs, interviewing, doing their resumes, etc., and actually what to do if you're unemployed.
Sandals Barbados Resort and Spa, through the Sandals Foundation, donated money to the two breakfast programs. General Manager of Sandals Barbados, Joseph Zellner, says this is the first of many sponsorship agreements to come from the foundation.
We are still looking for additional charities and additional organizations to support in Barbados, which we do at every island. We are presently just selecting a school which we will adopt and where we will do a lot of educational programs and support programs.
The talk of legalizing marijuana internationally in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Jamaica can be confusing for young people. This is the concern of Senator Andre Worrell as he spoke to the press at the launch of a drug awareness exhibition at the National Library Service. The exhibition is a partnership between the National Committee for Prevention of Alcoholism and Drug Dependency.
there is scientific evidence which shows the effect of marijuana use on brain development, in particular in teenagers and so forth. So we have to weigh it very carefully, because the argument that some people would put that there is economic value from this, the sale of legalizing marijuana, but you have to look on the other side of the coin. What expenses would we have in terms of money that we would have to spend, one, in preventing children from using it, in terms of more advertising, in terms of prevention and so forth, the emotional, psychological, and even the financial drain that it could possibly have on the society from abuse.
Senator Worrell is arguing that both sides of the coin must be analysed on this issue of legalising marijuana, but he is not agreeing with the argument that the legalisation of marijuana can boost the economy.
If you look at the way how marijuana is currently, you might say, but how are you going to actually tap into that revenue generating potential, given the culture that already exists around marijuana use, those who sell it, those who buy it, and so forth? I don't really see it as being a very strong argument that it would actually, that the economy would actually see significant increases in revenue. Where you can actually see there's scientific evidence that would show that the economy may actually have to spend more money in terms of health care and in terms of preventing the abuse. So you have to look at that as well.